Let me tell you something important right now. Choosing to go no contact with a narcissist is one of the most difficult and brave decisions a person can make. And if you're listening to this, it means you've either already taken that step or you're seriously thinking about it. But here's what many people don't realize. Just because you've decided to walk away doesn't mean they've stopped thinking about you. In fact, the moment you become silent is often the moment their real strategy begins, because narcissists rarely just let go and move on. No, they observe, they plan, and they wait patiently. Their silence is not a sign that they respect your boundaries. Their lack of contact is not proof that they've moved forward with their lives. More often than not, they're quiet because they're figuring out their next move. And today, I'm going to pull back the curtain and reveal what's really happening. I'm going to show you the 7 hidden things a narcissist secretly wants from you when you cut them off. Not the obvious drama that everyone talks about. I'm talking about what happens beneath the surface, what they're hoping you'll do, what they're secretly watching for, and why your silence isn't a period of rest for them. It's part of a calculated strategy. So, if you've ever questioned whether you made the right choice, if you've ever wondered why their presence still seems to linger in your emotions, stay with me. Because by the end of this, you'll see their tactics much more clearly, and even better, you'll know exactly how to protect yourself from them. The moment you go no contact with a narcissist, something is triggered inside them. It may not look like a dramatic confrontation or an angry argument. Sometimes it appears in subtle ways: a social media post, a story view, a random like, a short message. Anything that lets them know they still have an effect on you. Because when you become silent, their mind doesn't interpret that silence as closure. It sees it as a challenge, a test of their influence. And believe me, they are paying attention. They watch far more than you realize, even when it seems like they've completely forgotten about you. Why? Because your silence isn't simply silence in their eyes. It's a threat to the power and control they once enjoyed. Narcissists survive on attention. It doesn't matter whether that attention comes through affection or anger. To them, it's all the same source of supply. When you remove contact, it's as if you've cut off their oxygen. That silence and peace become empowering for you, but deeply uncomfortable for them. It creates confusion. It creates frustration. It forces them to question whether they still have influence over you. They hate not knowing what you're feeling, and what disturbs them even more is the possibility that you may actually be happy without them. So what happens next? They start testing. At first, it's subtle. They may view your stories without ever speaking. They may post vague messages that seem suspiciously directed toward you. They might ask mutual acquaintances about your life. They may leave comments connected to old memories, hoping the information somehow reaches you. Every one of these actions is bait. They're searching for a response, any response. Because the moment you react, they know you're still participating in the game, even if you believe you've already stepped away from it. And this is where things become dangerous. Narcissists study your emotional patterns. They know what affects you. They know what gets under your skin. If they can't get you to talk, they'll settle for making you feel something. If they can't pull you physically back into their world, they'll settle for occupying space inside your thoughts. They want you replaying old arguments. They want you checking their profiles. They want you wondering whether they're happy, whether they've changed, or whether they miss you. They want you upset, confused, angry, heartbroken, or hopeful. Because every emotional reaction, even one you never reveal, gives them a sense of power. They don't necessarily need a text message from you. They simply need to believe that you still care. To them, that's a victory. Because if you still care, they convince themselves that they still have influence over part of your life. The moment you react, even in the smallest way, a comment, a cryptic post, a quote reflecting your emotions, they see it as evidence that the door remains unlocked. And if the door is unlocked, they believe they can return whenever they choose. Now let's talk about the psychological tactics they often use during no contact. Sometimes they disappear completely on purpose, not because they've moved on, but because they want you to wonder why. Why aren't they contacting you? Did they forget you so quickly? Did they ever care at all? That silence is often intentional. It isn't peace, it's provocation. They're using their absence as a tool designed to make you question your decision. They want confusion to build inside you until it pushes you to break no contact. The moment you send a message, the moment you reach out, the power dynamic shifts. And in their mind, they've regained control. They don't just hope for a reaction, they expect one. Many of them genuinely believe you won't last. They assume you'll miss them, question yourself, and eventually return. And if direct contact isn't possible, they'll find indirect methods. They may post carefully crafted messages, they may spread half-truths, they may suddenly showcase a new relationship, not necessarily because they've moved on, but because they want to keep your attention fixed on them. They want to know you're still watching, because attention creates emotional investment, and emotional investment gives them a feeling of control. Nearly every move they make during no contact is deliberate. It's not personal growth, it's manipulation. They're not truly moving forward, they're trying to pull you backward. They're attempting to restart the same painful cycle that you've worked so hard to escape. They want to ensure that even while you're silent, they still occupy valuable space inside your mind. Meanwhile, every day you maintain no contact, you reclaim another piece of your strength. When a narcissist loses access to you, they don't suddenly develop deep self-awareness. They don't magically experience authentic remorse. Instead, what often happens is that they try to turn your silence into guilt. They want your silence to become a mirror that makes you doubt yourself. They crave your guilt, your second-guessing, your emotional uncertainty, because guilt is one of the strongest chains they can use. And if they can't reach you physically, they'll try to establish residence inside your thoughts. To them, your silence doesn't just feel like rejection. It feels like humiliation. It wounds their ego. But instead of accepting that reality, they rewrite the story. Suddenly, you're the cold one. You're the selfish one. You're the person who walked away without trying. In the narrative they've created, you become the villain. And this reversal is powerful because it causes you to question your own perception. You start reviewing conversations, replaying disagreements, examining memories, wondering where everything went wrong. That's exactly what they want. They want you trapped inside an emotional loop for so long that you begin forgetting the real reasons you went no contact. They want you remembering the charm, the laughter, the affection, the exciting moments, while conveniently overlooking the manipulation, disrespect, and pain. They want thoughts like these to appear in your mind. Maybe I overreacted. Maybe they weren't really that bad. Maybe I left too soon. That uncertainty becomes their secret doorway back into your life. If they can plant even a tiny seed of doubt, they know it may eventually grow into guilt, and once guilt takes root, you may begin feeling that you owe them something, a conversation, an explanation.
A second chance. Narcissists are incredibly skilled at using your empathy against you. In many cases, that's exactly what attracted them to you from the beginning. Your kindness, your compassion, your loyalty, your emotional depth. The very qualities they admired are often the qualities they learned to exploit. And when guilt doesn't bring you back, they'll often try a different approach. They'll make you feel guilty for leaving. They'll present themselves as abandoned, misunderstood, or broken. They'll play the victim, sometimes directly, other times through mutual friends, social media activity, or carefully designed silence that pulls at your conscience. It's manipulation without direct communication, and it can be remarkably effective when you're still healing. Because for caring people, guilt can feel overwhelming. They understand that. They rely on it. What they truly want isn't your love. What they want is your emotional energy, your attention, your inner conflict, that invisible tension you carry late at night when you wonder whether you were too harsh or too sensitive. That is exactly the state they're hoping you'll remain in. They hand you an emotional burden and then watch to see if you'll carry it for them. They don't want clarity. They want confusion. They don't want peace. They want uncertainty. They want your strength to feel like cruelty and your distance to feel like betrayal. And when guilt begins to grow, it doesn't stay quiet. It becomes louder and louder. Narcissists understand how to keep that echo bouncing around your mind until it occupies every corner of your thoughts. Even without direct contact, they still want control. They want to live inside your mind without paying rent. They want your obsession, not necessarily the kind where you chase them, but the kind where you endlessly replay the past. They want you wondering what you could have done differently. They want you questioning what they're doing now, because that's the true objective. If they can't have your presence, they will try to steal your peace. For them, being remembered, being discussed, even being disliked can still feel like power. So when you catch yourself replaying arguments, imagining future conversations, or wondering what they might say if you spoke again, remember something important. That isn't evidence that you need them. It's evidence of the conditioning they worked so hard to create. They built that cycle deliberately. They conditioned you to question yourself, to hold on to hope, and to keep trying to repair what was broken. But every single time you resist the urge to contact them, you weaken that cycle a little more. You gradually replace their voice with your own. You stop asking yourself, what if they change? And begin telling yourself, I deserve peace. And that is where your true strength begins to emerge. Because narcissists can only thrive where confusion and chaos exist. The more peace you choose, the less space they have to operate. The more silent you remain, the less visible their control becomes. Your distance is not weakness. It's recovery. It's the collapse of their illusion and the beginning of your freedom. You may still find yourself analyzing their behavior, trying to make sense of their mixed messages, or constantly checking social media to see whether they've posted something new. All of that is energy. It's attention. And they enjoy knowing they still hold that level of influence over you without saying a single word. To them, it proves the connection hasn't been fully broken. It has simply taken on a different form. They don't need to communicate when they've already occupied space inside your mind. This is exactly why narcissists often leave relationships surrounded by confusion. Confusion keeps the attachment alive. Clarity ends it. If you had clearly recognized every manipulation while it was happening, you would have walked away and never looked back. So they create contradictions. They combine affection with criticism, closeness with distance, promises with disappointment. That confusion becomes a psychological anchor, Long after the relationship has ended, you may still be trying to solve a puzzle that was never meant to have a solution. And while you're searching for answers, they're hoping you remain emotionally invested. They want you looking for meaning in their actions. They want you decoding messages that may not even exist. They want you spending hours trying to understand someone who never intended to be understood. Because every minute spent analyzing them is a minute not spent rebuilding yourself. What truly threatens a narcissist isn't your anger. It isn't your sadness. It isn't even your silence alone. What threatens them most is your indifference. The moment you stop needing answers, stop chasing closure from them, and stop monitoring their life, something powerful begins to happen. Their control starts to disappear. You no longer require their validation to move forward. You no longer need their explanations to heal. You no longer need their apology to experience peace. And that is the outcome they fear the most. Because once you become emotionally unavailable to their manipulation, their influence begins fading. The hooks lose their hold. The bait loses its appeal. The games stop working. Your silence becomes more than silence. It becomes a declaration that your peace matters more than their chaos, a declaration that your healing matters more than their approval, a declaration that the cycle ends here. And while they may continue watching, waiting, testing, or hoping for a reaction, every day you choose yourself over the old pattern is another day their grip becomes weaker. The greatest victory in no contact is not getting them to understand what they did. It's not revenge. It's not proving a point. The greatest victory is reclaiming your mind, your energy, your confidence, and your peace. Because once those things belong to you again, there is nothing left for them to control. They almost never offer real closure. They rarely accept responsibility. They won't clearly explain themselves, and they certainly won't fully acknowledge the pain they caused. Instead, they disappear, they ghost, they discard, or they suddenly become distant and cold without warning because they understand that confusion is one of the fastest paths to obsession. The human mind dislikes unfinished endings. It naturally searches for understanding and resolution. So when someone vanishes or completely rewrites the story without providing an explanation, your thoughts begin racing to fill the empty spaces, trying to make sense of something that never truly made sense in the first place. And that's exactly what they depend on. The more you think about it, the more influence they continue to have over your emotions. Sometimes they'll even leave behind a small amount of false hope before disappearing. Maybe they talked about a future with you. Maybe they offered an apology that sounded sincere enough to keep you uncertain. Or perhaps they said they only needed some time and space. Those aren't always innocent comments. They're breadcrumbs, emotional hooks designed to keep you wondering whether they'll return, whether they meant what they said, or whether you should continue waiting. And every moment you spend trapped inside that mental loop becomes a victory for them. Even their silence can be intentional. By remaining quiet, they know your own mind will often do the work for them. You'll question why they haven't reached out. You'll wonder whether they ever truly cared. You'll ask yourself if you somehow caused the situation. That emptiness becomes an echo chamber that keeps you emotionally attached, constantly trying to fill in the missing pieces. They may not contact you directly, but they might post something suggestive online, a vague caption, a carefully selected quote, a photograph that appears to show they're perfectly happy and moving on without you. None of it is accidental. None of it is random. It's designed to keep your emotions spinning in circles. The obsession they create is not really about love. It isn't even about missing the good moments. It's about emotional control. They want your recovery to move slowly. They want your confidence tied to their approval. They want memories of them interrupting your peace, your sleep, your progress, and your ability to move forward. Because if they still occupy your thoughts, then in their mind, they still matter. And for a narcissist, becoming irrelevant is one of their greatest fears. That's why detaching from a narcissist isn't simply about blocking a number or ending communication. It's about reclaiming your mental and emotional space. As long as they continue living inside your thoughts, they don't have to be physically present in your life to affect it. They've created a version of themselves inside your mind that constantly replays conversations, analyzes details, and second guesses every decision. The hardest part is that you may not even realize you're doing it. You might convince yourself it's just part of the healing journey. But from their perspective, that ongoing fixation becomes a delayed source of supply. It feeds their ego even when no words are exchanged. So even when there is no contact, the game continues. Not through texts or phone calls, but through the emotional residue they intentionally left behind. They expect you to carry it. They expect you to revisit it. They expect you to relive it again and again. That's what they truly want, to remain unforgettable, even if the only thing keeping them alive in your memory is pain. When a narcissist encounters no contact, they rarely interpret it as a healthy boundary. Instead, they see it as an interruption in the game, a pause before the next round begins. They don't genuinely believe you're gone forever. Deep down, they assume you'll eventually return. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next week, but eventually. They rely on that belief because they've conditioned you through cycles of love bombing, devaluation, confusion, and chaos. They've trained your emotions to crave their attention, fear their absence, and seek their approval even when doing so causes pain. So when you finally pull away, they don't always panic right away. Instead, they wait. They assume you'll be the first one to break. They believe their influence extends far beyond the relationship itself. They know what triggers your guilt. They know what makes you question yourself. They know which hopes you're still secretly holding on to. They've carefully constructed an image of themselves that is difficult to completely reject, even after everything you've experienced. So when you walk away, they don't view it as the ending. They convince themselves you simply need time to cool off, settle down, and miss them. They believe you'll eventually reach out. Until then, they remain silent, confident that you're still emotionally connected. Sometimes they'll even turn your silence into a weapon against you. They'll tell other people that you're cold, unreasonable, or immature. They'll claim you abandoned them without explanation. They do this because they're attempting to rewrite the narrative. That's the strategy. If they can make it appear as though you overreacted, then they keep the door open for future manipulation.